All right, everybody doing good? Yeah. All right, cool. My name's Kirk. Some of you know me as Captain Kirk. Some of you know me as Dr. Kirk. I've been working. I've been an OT for about 13 years. About 10 going on 11 have been primary in lymphatics and wound care. And today I'm going to take you on a little journey about nutrition. Just some basics, some things that I've noticed with some of my patients that I feel like it makes a very significant effect of how their nutrition is. It makes a significant effect on their prognosis. So before we get started, there's a few things I have to make you aware of. I am employed by Spear Memorial Hermann. I'm also the founder of Enable, Restore, Adapt Therapeutic. It's a lymphedema, occupational therapy, and home modification firm. I'm also the executive director and co-founder of Flow, which is a nonprofit where we're gearing to get compression garments education for lymphatic patients. And I'm also an assistant professor at ACC. So, the lymphatics have been identified around the 17th century. They developed right after the cardiovascular system. And normally you can see them in about the 4th, 5th week of pregnancy. So why is it that they're always not as characterized as blood in the vascular system? Well, it wasn't until the 21st century that the lymphatics started showing more endothelial markers, and studies started showing different proteins and polyurethatic receptors, which are very important in signaling inflammation and letting those lymphatics know what's actually going on when there's some invaders in there before you go. So this, the hyaluronin receptor, it's so funny because, it's something that the body secretes, but now I'm seeing these in all types of makeups and people using it for their tissue. So as I was saying about the hyaluronin receptors, you can actually, a lot of makeups are actually using it now for skin. And it's something that if you're one of those ladies that like or are using those hyaluronin receptors, you can actually find it in soy and a lot of oranges. So. Yes. So those are some of the markers that are used in the first inflammation phase, and so the lymphatics get signaled when pathogens come in, and so it helps keep those tissues fresh. So when you're looking at the two different systems, the circulatory system and the lymphatic system, you'll find that the circulatory system is a closed system that's very high pressure. You've got the heart just pumping, moving a lot of lymphatics. And then you've got a lot of vessels that are attached by a matrix. Now you have the lymphatics, which are kind of just really chill and like to move very passively. When I say that, you have they're affected by, let's say, your respiration. So if you're running, they're going to pump a lot harder. If you're sleeping or chilling out, they're going to pump a lot slower. They're also affected by the skeletal system. So like I said, if you're moving, and those kind of contractions are happening. And then if you know about the lymphatic system, you know that they move, those valves are moved by muscles on the outside of those valves. And then lastly, not like the blood vessels, the lymphatics are a lot more attached to those matrices. So what are some of the similarities between large blood vessels and large lymphatics? They both have basement membranes. They both have valves to move fluid. They both have signaling molecules that will aid in survival, movement across the cell membrane, and migration. So why is the lymphatic system so underappreciated if it does so much? Why is it? If it aids in the circulatory system, aids in moving fluid back to the central system, aids in controlling your metabolism in adipose tissue, and it's a fighter against immunity, why is it so underappreciated? The lymphatic system has 3 major duties. Moving fluid through the lymphatic system, moving fluid back to the central system, facilitating absorption of dietary foods and fat tissue in the gut. And then, like I said earlier, maintaining a good destruction of pathogens in the lymphatic system. When you look at that, what does that mean? Lymphatic vessels are reabsorb an interstitial fluid. They return fluid back to the central system, prevents excessive buildup in those tissues, and then again works to fight off infection. So I keep saying all this, but what does that mean? What does that look like? When you're looking at the lymphatic system and how is it working, what does that mean? So you have blood vessels that are moving or throughout the body, and they're getting rid of little particles that are coming into the interstitium, that little dead space in between. Then you have little capillaries, little trees grabbing for pathogens, for foreign particles, bringing it into that unknown space, into deep collectors, into other vessels, deeper into other vessels, and then eventually into your lymph nodes where the magic starts happening. That's when those lymph nodes will say, hey, let's kill these cancers, let's kill these pathogens, let's kill all these foreign bodies that just shouldn't be here. Let's keep those white blood cells and store them, let's fight off some other infection, and then all those red blood cells, let's send it back to the central system so that the cardiovascular system can have more blood and oxygen. Now, when that doesn't happen, then that's when you get that destruction and you get that buildup of soft tissue, and you see it as swelling. Now, I say you see it as swelling, but you always see it as swelling. You may not always see it as swelling. You may have patients that come in and complain and say, I have inability to close my hand. I have bad range of motion in my knees. I feel tightness in my arms. So that's when the therapist, physician, or a clinician needs to look and do a deeper dive and see what's going on, what has been ailing him for that. So where can that swelling or that buildup be found? It can be anywhere, head and neck. It could be arms, legs, genitals, breast, abdomen. I have patients ask me, hey, that person has swelling in their tongue? How is that possible? They have swelling in their back? Seriously? Yeah, anywhere it's possible because their lymphatics are everywhere. So when we think about this, lots of patients may have a cluster of risk factors known as METs. So which leads to different types of diagnoses and different types of ailments. Some of those major ones are heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And some larger risk factors of getting METs are abdominal obesity, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, insulin resistance. And when I say insulin resistance, we're talking about the body to keep on making more insulin. However, the cells are not able to understand that insulin and take that information in. And so what happens then is the pancreas starts making more and more and more, and then you start getting more, it starts storing, and you start getting more adipose tissue. And then you have some patients that have, unfortunately, a pro-inflammatory characteristic where their body just throws more pathogens out. And so they're high at risk of developing some type of illness. So you have two body shapes here. You have the pear shape and you have the apple shape. Both of these patients are at risk of getting METs. However, the patients with the pear shape are more at risk of developing METs, which means they're more at risk of developing adipose tissue and having other ailments. Now, it does not mean if you have a apple shape and you're heavy up top with a lot more adipose tissue up top that you're not susceptible to developing METs in the future. However, the pear shape is more likely. So, more risk factors. You might be prothrombotic, meaning you have blood clots consistently, have DVTs all the time. You may have, or the patient may have fatty liver disease, constantly developing more fat in the body. Have ovary syndrome, patients who have issues with sleeping, or sleep apnea. Age also plays a role in possibility of getting METs, and then ethnicity. Hispanic women seem to be at a higher risk of developing METs. The information that I found isn't conclusive on actually why at this point, so that's still being researched. So one of the largest possibilities of getting METs is obesity. Studies have shown in mice, which they've correlated also well to humans, that it leads to slower dysfunction of the lymphatic system, loss of lymphatic integrity. When I say that, I mean it's not pumping as well, there's leakage going on, and there's deformities going on with the lymphatics. There's also been associated chyli dysfunction, which is that fluid, fat, milky substance in the intestines that helps move triglycerides. And then issues with storing fat and absorbing fat into the intestines. So what does that mean? That means if you have a problem with storing fat and being able to absorb it into the intestines, it leads to poor metabolism, more adipose tissue, more swelling in the in the interstitium, and possibly lymphedema. So when you're looking at overweight, obesity, what does that really mean? So this is defined by the CDC. I'm just going to read this. Weight that is higher than what is considered healthy for a given height is described as overweight or obesity. Or obese. Obesity is a complex disease that occurs when an individual's weight higher than what is considered healthy for his or her weight. So what does that mean? That is something that's going to be defined by the patient, their physician, nutrition, person that's working with them on their healthcare journey. Then you have body mass index, which measures body fat on height, weight, and applies to adult men and women. So, underweight is about 19 pounds, 19 pounds of body mass index. This has all been converted into pounds. Normal weight is between 19 and 25. Overweight is 25 and 30. And then obesity is greater than 30. Now, when you're looking at this, you have to also remember that it's only valid if, it's only valid if the person is over 20, because this is not for people under 20. And it's also not valid if you are someone who exercises a lot and high resistance weights or weightlifting, because you're going to have more weight because muscle weighs more than fat. So then this wouldn't be valid. Now, who's a mathematician in here that could do this weight over pounds, height, multiplied by 2 by 703 real quick?
There's an app for that.
Okay, there's an app for that. Okay, go ahead, click on it. Fortunate for you, we've got charts. So someone like me, I'm 72. I'm 72 inches. Oh. Yeah, right? Yeah, age well. Anyway, height is on this side, 72 inches. I fluctuate in weight. I go anywhere from about 156 to like 162. So you would just come across here, and let's just say I'm 150. Let's just say I'm 156. I'm gonna have about 21 pounds of, I'm gonna have a BMI of 21. So if it was someone who's, let's say they're 4'11", so they're gonna be 59 inches, you would just come across there, let's say they weigh about 124 pounds, and then they're gonna have a 25 is gonna be their BMI. Now, if you're tall, you're like 6'4", 6'6", we have higher inches for you. Okay. All right, keep going. So obesity seems to keep playing in this PowerPoint, right? So studies have shown that there's significant impairments in lymphatics when it comes to obesity. Decreased ability to transport lymphatic fluid. You have poor migration across cells. You have reduced ability of those lymphocytes that fight off infection. You have decreased development of those lymphocytes. When you have more adipose tissue, the lymphatics start to morph and the structure starts changing. And that with an increase of adipose tissue, you have an increase of swelling in the interstitial, along with increased fibrosis, which leads to severe lymphedema. You also have the lymphatics that collect most of those fluids. They start expanding, and so those leaves or levers that open and close don't close all the way, so you get more gravity pulling lymphatics down. And then you get a lot more smooth muscle cells that are start sending out less signals to tell the rest of the lymphatics what to do. So this was a study I saw that I found kind of interesting. This was 114 women. It was over in Washington. They were trying to look at obesity, overweight, and how it plays on immune function, and how their eating patterns play on immune function. So they took, like I said, they took 114 women between age 51 to 75. They were women that exercised regularly and were stated to have normal immune function. So what did that look like? They had to be postmenopausal, non-smoking, couldn't have more than 2 drinks per day. They were overweight or obese, defined by BMI. They exercise at least 60 minutes a week, either moderate or heavy exercise. Had a fasting blood sugar of at least 126 for at least 6 months. Are y'all familiar with blood sugar? Okay. Any diabetics in here? Just me? All right. And then they also had to have no mets, so no cancer, no invasive, no lung disease, and no other cardiovascular issues. They also couldn't have any respiratory issues, and that was defined as shortness of breath, asthma, COPD, anything that caused any kind of slowing of breathing. And they couldn't be on any type of non-inflammatory or corticosteroids. Mm-hmm. So they used 2 different indexes. One was the diet quality index, and they had a score of 10. Well, actually, no, this was the one. They used 8 different categories. And so these women had to reduce their total fat intake by 30% of the energy that they were actually putting out. They had to reduce their saturated fat intake, reduce their cholesterol by 300 milligrams, eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. How many people eat 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day? You're good. You're good. Anybody else? A lot of antioxidants in fruits and vegetables, guys. And then 6 servings of bread, cereal, or types of beans. Maintain moderate protein intake, lower their sodium, and then maintain a decent calcium intake. So the other index they used was based on the healthy eating prism, but they had their it was a little bit modified in that they had 10 different 10 categories, very specific: saturated fats, total fats, cholesterol, salts, fruits, dairy, meats, and vegetables. But they also gave a score on how well the patients mixed all that up. So, in the way they took, after they took all that information about their eating and their diet, they took blood draws. And so the way they did that, they did between the morning of 7:30 and 8 a.m., no exercise, no alcohol in between that time. They couldn't have any type of shots or any type of immunization less than 3 weeks from that time. And then that blood was processed. And they took that blood and took out the leukocytes and watched how it proliferated. So moved across and made more cells. Mm-hmm. So what did they find from that? Well, what's funny is they didn't find any correlation with actual eating patterns. However, higher quality diet increased lymphocyte proliferation, which you kind of probably figured. Those lymphocytes that fight off infection, those white blood cells that fight off infection, they increased by 30%, which you probably thought. The helper cells that go in to also help do that, they actually decreased by 10% as the diet went up. So that was kind of interesting. And then immune function declined as the patient's age. So those T helper cells and those lymphocytes, all those white blood cells that go in and fight off infection, actually decreased as those patients who were closer to 75 were tested. So, and why do you think that possibly happened? Normally, because as we get older, we eat a little differently. Our diets change, and we alter what we eat. And when we alter what we eat, we alter the possibility of getting some of those micro nutrients that we all need. So this was another study with mice, and these people just really pumped these mice up. So they took 2 sets of mice. One they call the controlled diet, one they call the Western induced diet, or Western diet induced, excuse me, where basically they were both tested. So they test their popliteal lymphatics. So those are those lymphatics behind your knee. And they also test your mesenteric lymphatics. So those are the lymphatics in your gut, kind of holds the intestines and spleen and stuff together. And so they tested them. They made sure that all the lymphatics were moving and working and had good contractility. So then, after 14 weeks of letting the controlled diet mice eat mouse chow, normal food, they had the other mice just eat whatever they put out there, and they just let them have free range. So, of course, their plasma increased. Of course, their cholesterol increased. And so, what did that look like? It looked like both of them having the same amount of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. So the same 20% of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. However, when you look at the controlled diet versus the Western diet, the controlled diet, they gained about 10 pounds. The Western diet, they gained about 20 pounds. So the big difference was these guys had macronutrients. So they had healthy proteins, healthy fats, and healthy carbohydrates. And so when these other guys had free reign to whatever food was there, you can see that the fat content went up and the carbohydrate percentage went up, but their protein levels went down. So what happens with all that? What does that really mean? It means the patient, the mice who got to eat everything had loss of muscle, which led to decrease in metabolism, which means an increase in adipose tissue. They had hormone imbalance, which directly affects your lymphatics. So they had lymphatic function loss, and then they became sluggish. So when you become sluggish, as you remember what I said earlier, your lymphatics are very passive, they're very chill. So they need that contractility. They need that muscular activity. They rely on muscle. So if they're not moving, they're not. If they're not moving, you're not moving, they're not moving as well for you. What was interesting is with both mice, in the back of the leg, in those popliteal areas, nothing changed. I found that really interesting. No morphological change, no destruction, nothing. However, in that mesenteric area in your gut, those lymphatics became enlarged, the valves became shortened, and what happens is, the lymphatics are set like so, and you have valves right here, and they're moved by these muscles on the outside, and they pump. So if those muscles get weak, those lymphatics get larger, those valves start to spread out, and gravity starts pulling those lymphatics down, and you get more stasis happening. So what did they have to do? In order to get those lymphatics and those Western diet mouse to actually pump, they had to have a large amount of pressure just to trigger a valve closure. And so what they kind of concluded was, with metabolic alterations based on the food that you're taking in, leads to valve destruction, which hence leads to more fluid which leads to obesity, which leads to lymphatic destruction. So when you're looking at nutrition and the immune system, they go hand in hand. You must have a good optimal nutrition in order to have a good optimal response for the lymphatics. Those adequate nutrition helps antibody production. Minerals and vitamins are preventatives. They reduce destruction, stop free radicals from getting any worse, and help those white blood cells improve their function. Macronutrients that we've kind of talked about a couple times: proteins, fats, carbohydrates. You need that energy, you need that metabolism to sustain your muscle mass and have a healthy weight. So these are some charts. If anybody wants them, I can send them to you. I'm just going to tease out a little information. I'm not going to go through all of it. So, like, for example, vitamin A is really good in getting those macrophages. So when inflammation comes, those white blood cells go and they attack. You can find those in eggs, liver, turkey, and meat. Vitamin D is also very good with the inflammatory stage. You can find in liver, fish, and shiitake mushrooms. Go ahead. Vitamin E, good for killing cytotoxins. You can find it in soy, corn, and soaked almonds. Vitamin C, everybody's pretty familiar with vitamin C. It's a natural antioxidant. Find it in peppers, tomatoes, broccoli, sprouts, citrus. B6 promotes lymphatic migration and movement. You can find it in whole grains, vegetables, nuts. Vitamin B9, B12, also very good in fighting off toxins. Find in potatoes, orange juice, sardines, salmon. Iron is needed not only in normal lymphatic function, but also needed when patients have venous stasis wounds from lymphatic disruption. You can find that in a whole host of different meats. And zinc. So then magnesium, copper, and selenium, also very good. They help decrease, actually, magnesium is very good in stopping oxidation, and copper, very good for any inflammation response. And selenium, you can find, again, is also good for that corrosion and antioxidant, and you can find that in seafood. So, micronutrients, very effective for optimal performance. Various micronutrients are very important in cell healing and proliferation and cell function. And zinc is very good for fighting off various infections. Okay. So, when you have a wound, as in clinicians or in here, but if you have a wound, it's very hard sometimes to treat some of these venous stasis wounds when the patient is not eating optimally. I'll have a wound that gets to a certain place and it just will not progress. And then I'll find out that the patient's eating pizza. I'll find out the patient's eating a crazy amount of salt. And you have to think salt makes everyone swell. The difference is if you have a non-intact lymphatic system, you're not going to move that fluid out of your interstitium as fast as someone else is. And if you are not aware, if you have a wound is not going to heal if you have excessive amount of lymphatic fluid in there, because that skin cannot do its normal healing process because of that invasion of debris, foreign radicals, pathogens that are already in that area. So you got to move them out. And some of those things that can help them move it out is the proper micro and macronutrients. So what you don't want is you don't want a wound to get stuck in one of these specific phases. And this is what happens a lot when I'm treating patients and we get to a certain progress and we're moving along, we're cruising, and then we're in proliferation phase, Why are we still in proliferation phase? And it's possibly because of what they're eating. Vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin B12, as stated earlier, very good for increasing, very good with increasing proliferation, very good with lymphatics or leukocytes, very good with tissue health. And then I am a big proponent of having people eat salmon. So when patients are, so we all need protein. When you have a patient that has a wound, a cut, laceration, whatever it may be, they need a lot more protein. They need it because the body is asking for it and it needs it. So, you know, you can go eat chicken, you can go eat a steak, but you probably shouldn't go eat a fatty ribeye, not probably the best idea. But something like salmon is fantastic. It's a superfood, it's got the protein, it's got the omega fatty acids, it's even got collagen, which is really good, especially if that patient is stuck in that proliferation phase. You know, and then to see what their fats are, see what they're cooking with. You know, tell them to switch over to avocado oil, sunseed oil. There's so many other oils that actually have a higher cooking rate, like avocado oil, 400, 500 degrees than some of the other stuff. You know, some people will say, oh, I can't afford it. It's cheaper than olive oil. Okay. So some studies have shown various different teas are very, very promising when it comes to boosting the lymphatic system and detoxifying, cutting down inflammation, and supporting lymphatic health. So when you're thinking about foods again, you need to think about foods that decrease pathogen growth. Things of sorts of like cranberries, cherries, raspberries, blueberries, things that automatically reduce that inflammation phase. In closing, it is advantageous to keep a stable and regular diet that is consistent with micro and macronutrients in order to sustain a healthy lifestyle and keep lymphatics operating at their highest potential to reduce any type of lymphatic dysfunction. Yes, sir.
Have you read that book? I think it's like Diet for Blood Type.
I have not.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, write that down. I'm just curious because I've read a lot of different books about different nutrition for lymphedema or lymphatic diseases. In your experience, what do you typically recommend as like a specific diet for a patient? Like I know keto's pretty popular for some lymphedema patients. And are there any like specific foods that across the board are going to cause inflammatory responses that we should avoid altogether?
Well, you know, it's funny because I looked at, I did see in here that they talked about a keto diet a lot for lymphatics, but in my own opinion, you know, not everyone can afford certain things in some of these certain diets. So, you know, when some people can't have various proteins because they feel like they're so expensive, so I'll say like different types of nuts and legumes and things of that sort. You know, I try to tell people, because I feel like there's no true lymphatic diet, you know, and I feel like everyone's different. I try to tell people cut down on their salts, cut down on their fats. If you can, every once in a while, throw some salmon in there, you know, it's a splurge, because I know it's not easy for everyone to afford. And then exercise, really. So, and you know, I feel like a lot of people like me, I'm one of them, eat a lot of salt. Yeah, I put salt on everything. And so that's something that I feel like people need to cut down because that makes people swell. Very. Yes.
If there's any type of renal problems going on, wouldn't a keto diet, that's the high protein diet, wouldn't that be contraindicated in that?
Yeah. So I would definitely, you know, like I'm not promoting the keto diet because I feel like that's specific for a certain patient. So you would, and that's why actually I didn't put it on here because I did read a lot about it. But it's something that I feel like you discuss specifically with your physician, especially when I was talking also like we have BMI and obesity and stuff of that sort, that's going to be determined on you and your physician and the people who are working with you on that health journey. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I would just like to make a suggestion on, you said that salmon can be quite expensive for some people.
Mhm.
Just like canned tuna, there is canned salmon, and it's actually wild Alaskan cod. So it might be a very healthy option versus a fresh salmon steak in the fish department.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. And it's probably preserved very well. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
What did you say in the beginning about these oranges? You said
Oh.
about oranges.
Hyaluronin. Hyaluronin is a lymphatic that is secreted, and now I've seen like a lot of commercials where they're like hyaluronic acid. It has hyaluronic acid, but they're using it to get rid of crow's feet and work with their skin and stuff of that sort. And so I said you can find some of that same hyaluronin in soy and in oranges.
Any specific orange?
That I don't know.
Okay.
If I did, they'd probably be very expensive. Mhm. Yes.
So I wanted to go back to the statement you made about insulin resistant.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my A1C fluctuates month to month or every quarter to quarter. I'm not sure if it's because of my lymphatic problem and the fact that I don't have 27 lymph nodes gone. But what I have is this weird intake. I eat healthy, like we were talking. Unless I just eat frustrated and walk bread. But
I do it too. You gotta have a break sometime.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Mhm.
one of my things is each time I go to my endocrinologist, he said, well, you're at that insulin resistance, so you're gonna fluctuate, you're up and down. Well, my body is saying, well, I'm not used to this weight. When you gonna dump it? Because I didn't gain all this weight to post chemo, radiation, nothing, and I eat accordingly. Today, I ate those chips, but they were whole. Okay? But this was 0.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But this morning when I got on the scale, I had a total different number than I had yesterday. It's just driving me crazy. Because and it's because of insulin resistance. And the next thing I'm gonna know, oh, you're diabetic. Well, I'm not gonna take this metformin because I'm on enough drugs for all this other stuff. Metformin just gonna pull the weight off me quickly, and then if I stop taking, I'm gonna blow up bigger. So, my reason for staying here to understand the wellness of nutrition of lymphatic is what am I eating that's keeping me swollen?
No,
And
there's a-
why can't I drain what I have? I use the pump, I do manually, I do elevation. 5 years, 2016, nobody has an answer for me. I'm tired.
Yeah, you got a lot there. I'm gonna see if I can address some of it. When you go through, you had cancer? Yeah. Yeah, when you go through that, unfortunately, the things that the tools that they use to help us get better are meant to kill cancer. They're meant to kill cells. Radiation, chemo, they're meant to cause damage. So unfortunately, there is collateral damage that occurs. And so, you may have, I have a lot of patients that have associated swelling, associated abnormalities, postural abnormalities, fluid gain, weight gain, and they say, hey, it was after this, it was after chemo, after radiation. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that you kind of sign off on to, and I don't mean this to be like I don't care. It's, unfortunately, that's one of those things that happen. It's one of those side effects, and it's really sad, but that's kind of what happens. And you know, when you talk about insulin resistance, I'm also insulin resistant. And so when I found out that I was diabetic, I was gaining more weight, and kept gaining more weight, and it wasn't until, because I was all across the board. They put me on metformin too, and I started losing weight, but my A1C was all over the place. It fluctuated, and it wasn't until I said, hey, forget this guy. I'm going to go to an endocrinology center. And so that's when they taught me how to eat, and they gave me different medication that wasn't just metformin. So I'm on like a series of medicines, and sometimes I go places and they're like, what is that? But these medicines have kept me at 6.4, you know, for, yeah. You're a 5.7? Oh, you're good. Oh, you're good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your A1C. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh. So I'll tell you something. I'll tell you something else. When they first told me, they said, eat breakfast, eat lunch, eat dinner, have something in between. That doesn't work for me. Because what happens with me is I'll spike at breakfast. If I eat whatever, they told me eat 60 carbs. I need to only eat about 30 carbs. What I learned to do was manage an 1,800 calorie diet into basically means 60 carbs per meal. And so, but in the morning, I know my pancreas is going to be producing more insulin. And so I have less carbs and even less protein. And then I don't eat anything in between lunchtime, because what will happen is I'll spike back up again. So I'll only eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I try to have 60 carbs, and I'll have higher proteins, but I'll try to have 60 carbs. And if you have more protein, if you have at least 15 grams of protein in your meal, then what it'll do is it'll slow the absorption of those carbohydrates, and so they won't enter your bloodstream quicker. And your body will produce more insulin to try to fight off of that weight, and so you're not gaining more weight at the same time, or adipose tissue. And then when you get that more adipose tissue, your body's storing it, thinking it needs it, but it doesn't. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you. No, but if you send me your email, I can definitely send you these charts and stuff of that sort.
What is your
Let's see, what's a good one? Just Kirk, Kirk, dot COWARD as in David, B as in boy, EY at memorialherman.org. I'll say it again. Kirk, Kirk, dot COWARD as in David, B as in boy, EY at memorialherman.org. And Herman has two N's on the end. Anyone else? All right, you're welcome. Thank you.